As mentioned, today's program is has a bipartisan approach, and the person today who will be representing the opposition is a person that's a friend to many people within the multicultural community. He himself and his government and his party are also committed to sustaining social cohesion and working against all forms of racism. And we have one of their leaders who was a strong believer of multiculturalism, a person who entered Parliament back in 1992 and held various portfolios, including being the President of the Legislative Council. Please welcome Victorian Liberal Party's Member for Eastern Metropolitan Region, the Honourable Bruce Atkinson.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, how difficult it is to follow Richard Wynne, the new Minister. You actually have 5 minutes. but it was such an important speech. And it covered some really important statistics that we do need to think about and indeed act on, and some commitments from the government which, as Richard has said, are shared by the opposition and I think all of the parties across the Parliament, nearly all of the parties across the Parliament, in terms of a commitment and an enthusiasm for our multicultural community. It actually occurs to me, Richard, that I might dub you the Minister for Brickbats and Bouquets, because indeed the brickbats are the Ministry for Planning. You've already experienced that, and I think that's the brickbats part of the portfolio. The bouquets is certainly here in this space, looking after and nurturing our spirit of multiculturalism and building upon what have been very strong foundations over so many years. Can I also join Richard in acknowledging, and Rohini, in acknowledging the traditional owners of this land, and indeed we're on part of Melbourne where they conducted many of their forms of governance and celebrations, and it's therefore most appropriate that we reflect on some of the ways in which they addressed issues within their community. And I certainly pass on my respects to any elders and recognise those past, present and emerging in the traditional owners of Victoria. This journey that we have taken as a state and as a country has been a very special one. Apart from the obviously First Nations of this country, all of us are essentially immigrants. We've all come here from somewhere else at some point in time, either ourselves individually or through our forebears. And it's fantastic that at a place like this, the Immigration Museum, we can reflect on that journey of so many individuals and so many communities. We can reflect on their achievements, their accomplishments, but we should also reflect on their struggles and reflect on those things that made their journey here in Victoria more difficult than it ought to have been. We can reflect on the fact that some of the concerns that more recent migrants have actually been shared by migrants from other countries, other places, often escaping conflicts around the world in other decades. The experiences are not necessarily always new, but through understanding some of those struggles, through sharing some of that experience, hopefully we can do better. This is an important program. You know, we could say to people who are on the receiving end of racist remarks or other comment that diminishes them as people, we could say, man up, young fellow, or suck it up, princess. Just take it on the chin. Go on, don't worry about it. But we can't afford to do that. Because what that does is it actually robs our community of the talents of so many people. Because indeed there are consequences of these racist remarks, even throwaway lines. People feel bullied, they feel intimidated. They're less inclined perhaps to contribute to the extent that they can in our community affairs. When we call for people to come forward for particular tasks in the community, they're less likely to do that because they're concerned about the criticism or the things that might be said to them as they go about trying to undertake those tasks. In some cases, people die because of racist remarks. Because they actually suicide because they feel so depressed, so diminished as individuals by some of this extraordinary and outrageous behaviour. I can't imagine, and I don't think you could imagine, Victoria without those many communities that have come to share with us their experience, their talents, to share their faith, to share their cultural heritage. We are, as a state, extraordinarily blessed and enriched by the contribution that people have made from so many other places. And it breaks my heart, and I'm sure that those hearts of everyone in this room, to think that Victoria misses out on a greater opportunity where we do not encourage and support everyone, where we do not make sure that they feel comfortable, that they feel that they can make a contribution in our community. And clearly where they are not attacked, physically sometimes, but just as damagingly in taunts and racist comments. So I congratulate the organisations who've come together for this. I want to particularly reflect on Benevolence Australia because I went to one of their fundraisers a few months back. And I'm very mindful of the work that they do with Muslim women, because very often it is Muslim women who I think are on the receiving end of some of the worst of this racism because of the way they dress. And they should go on dressing the way they dress as they want to. It is their choice. And they ought not be on the receiving end of any of these racist taunts because they live their faith and they live their values. Benevolence Australia does a great job in supporting Muslim women and indeed Muslim families as a charity organisation. Jewish Community Council of Victoria, the students from the Jewish community who are part of this program, and indeed AIS, which I've had an association with for quite some time and is often praised by me as one of those organisations that actually goes out of its way to connect with other faiths, because essentially it's an Islamic organisation, but goes out of its way to connect with other faiths, and particularly, by the way, Richard, I'm going past 5 minutes too. and yeah, maybe not by the organisers, but AIS goes out of its way to actually promote an understanding of the Islamic faith and to overcome a lot of the ignorance about the faith, which is, I think, at the real nub of some of this adverse reaction that we see in the community and outrageous behaviour by some individuals. So to have the four organisations come together is fabulous in a program that I think has some real merit. I would hope actually that when the program has gone through, particularly today's session, and you have the learnings from today and a few of the other sessions that are to come, that you actually share some of that experience with members of Parliament as well, to make sure that all of the members of Parliament are aware of this program and understand some of the things that you are trying to do and what's actually been learned from some of the initial sessions. Because this is a program that needs to be like a stone in the water, sending out ripples. That's what it's designed to do, in my understanding, and I think that is very, very important. Congratulations to those people who conceived it. Congratulations to the government, Richard, for funding it and for recognising its importance as part of the whole strategy that, as you said, from a bipartisan point of view, is supported very strongly in making sure that racism is abolished, is eradicated in our community. That every single person can actually contribute to the best of their personal ability and within their communities, because Victoria is the richer and the stronger for that contribution. I don't ever want to see anybody put in a position where they are not able to make that contribution because they feel cowed, intimidated by behaviour that should not be tolerated. And every one of us, as Richard has said, has a role to play in making sure that that doesn't happen. Let's continue in our multicultural community not just to tolerate each other, but to celebrate each other and to celebrate our differences, because in those differences are our possibilities. Thank you for having me today.